Okay, hi everybody. This is Frank McNally again from Public Spend Forum. It's a moment or two after 2 p.m. Eastern Time, which is our scheduled start for this webinar today on how to use GovShop to discover professional services. I'm actually going to turn it over to Ash Beatty, our Managing Director here at Public Spend Forum. He's going to lead the webinar today, and I'll be fielding questions in the chat as well as the Q&A. So do feel free to ask those questions if you'd like, and I will field them and answer them if I can. Or I'll interject and let Ash know that we have a question. So I'm going to turn it over to Ash now for the webinar. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Frank, and welcome everybody. I'm very happy to be here today to provide you this quick introduction on how to use GovShop to identify professional services, suppliers, and contracts. This will be a quick 30-minute webinar today. This will be a brief introduction to that topic. We'll do follow-up webinars in this series on professional services, hitting up other aspects of doing searches related to professional services suppliers on GovShop. So thanks everyone for attending. Very briefly, I'm going to begin with a background on Public Spend Forum and GovShop, and then focus the bulk of our, the balance of 30 minutes on actually diving into the professional services topic. And doing some interesting demos, which I'm confident you'll find very, very helpful and interesting, and will motivate you to jump into GovShop and start using it on your own if you have not been already. So to get things going, GovShop is a supplier intelligence platform and ecosystem to support public procurement around the world. The URL is govshop.com. If you have not already gotten on GovShop, please do so. You can create a login for free that enables you to save your searches, and we'll have a whole host of other features that your login enables you to do. Again, all for free for buyers. A little bit about Public Spend Forum. So GovShop was developed by Public Spend Forum, and it's an integral part of our market and supplier intelligence offering. The background around GovShop. We know that market research can be very challenging, not just in the public sector, but anywhere that it's done. The fundamental issues that we found with market research revolve around not having enough time to actually do the market research to identify the suppliers. The second thing is that we know that markets are sometimes changing very often. Suppliers come and go, suppliers change. And so staying on top of that can be a challenge, not just for stable markets like professional services, but especially so for emerging markets such as cybersecurity. And of course, if you want to paint a more complete picture of your market and your suppliers that compete in that market, a lot of times you have to go to lots of different data sources and piece things together. Even if you have a ton of time, which nobody does, it's still not practical to do so, since you may not be aware of all the different data sources you need to go to. So fundamentally, these three things is what we're trying to address in terms of the underlying problems behind doing market research. And in developing GovShop, our primary mission is to create open government markets. How do we do this? On the left side here, I'm focusing in on two aspects of that, and that is having lots and lots of suppliers, so having a comprehensive supplier base that you can search off of for your product or service need. The second is, for each individual supplier, it's pretty important to have a robust set of information about that supplier that speaks to the supplier's capabilities, experience, contracts that might be leverageable, as well as their basic certification information. And how else do we do it? The right-hand side is speaking more so to the GovShop platform. It's a free browser-based search engine. It leverages machine learning, AI, and blockchain to gather data, in addition to lots of disparate data sources that we basically derive information off of on suppliers, who they are, what their capabilities are, and other pieces of key data on the suppliers themselves. So that's a little bit about Public Spend Forum and GovShop for those of you that may be new today. I'm now going to dive in on the topic for today, professional services. So let me begin first by level setting. What do we mean by professional services? By no means is this a precise definition. I put together this slide just to develop and get us on the same page on the intuition behind what do we mean by professional services. By the way, you'll see different organizations define it differently, maybe categorize some of these buckets a little bit differently. But in talking about professional services, I'm referring to things like administrative services, engineering and tech services, management and advisory services, and IT services. And you can group these, combine them in different ways, in whichever way suits how you're organized internally within your organizations. Side comment, if you look at the various product and service classification code sets out there, be it Psc codes, NAICS codes, MIGP codes, they all do it a little bit differently, but the purpose of this slide is really just to level set ourselves and get us on the same page on what we mean by professional services. I've also listed a few examples of specific things that you might, specific types of service areas and skills and expertise areas that you might want to be buying. You know, for admin services, the examples are like filing clerk, translation services, all the way down to IT services to the far right. It could be things like IT strategy and architecture services, systems implementations, cybersecurity services. You get the idea. So again, not a precise definition, but just meant to get us familiar with what we mean intuitively when we say professional services, at least for purposes of today's webinar and the subsequent webinars in this series. So having established that, before I do the demo, let me tell you a little bit about the numbers of suppliers that we have in GovShop. So right off the top, this slide says there's about a total of 735,000 or so suppliers in GovShop. This number is actually out of date. I just checked today, and it's upwards of a little over 760,000. We continue to add suppliers by the day, simply because that's pretty much what we do. We have more suppliers registering in the GovShop, and we ourselves are identifying more and more suppliers. Now that number that I just gave you, that's an aggregate number. That's across all products and services. So within professional services, roughly 80,000 out of the almost 800,000 suppliers in GovShop provide professional services. I suspect the number there is even higher than 80,000, but 80,000, where that comes from is, if I reference the Psc codes, which are in GovShop, and I'll get to that in a moment as I do the demo, you'll see what I'm referring to more specifically, in case you're not familiar with Psc codes. Psc stands for Product and Service Code. If I look at that code scheme in GovShop, and there's other code schemes there as well, which we'll also cover. The suppliers that I've added up come from the various Psc code groups that touch on professional services. That would be the R4 family, the R6, the R7, and the D3. So collectively, those different Psc code groups add up to roughly 80,000 unique suppliers. So tons of suppliers in GovShop that you can search from. One might even think at this point that's an unmanageably large number. As we go through the demo, I'm going to show you how to filter down to a more relevant set based on some basic filtering functionality that we have built into GovShop. Another point of interest, if I just focus in on one of those Psc code groups, R4, I'm just highlighting here some demographic information for the roughly 50,000 suppliers that are in R4. And if I look at some of the basic demographics, which by the way are also filters within GovShop, here you can see the number of suppliers by revenue tier size. In the middle, you can see the number of suppliers, how that 50,000 breaks down based on minority or ownership status. And then on the bottom, we're showing how many of those suppliers have a formal government set-aside status, be it SDVOSB, which by the way stands for Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business, or WOSB, Women-Owned Small Business, and a few others. These are all filters in GovShop, by the way. These are not the only filters in GovShop. There's a lot more filters as well, which I'll get into. So having covered that as background, I wanted to establish that there's upwards of 800,000 suppliers in GovShop, out of which roughly 80,000 or so provide professional services across these varying areas within professional services. Now I'm just going to dive right into the demo. I'm going to use this slide here as guidance for myself. There's three things that I wanted to cover today in the remaining 20 minutes that we have as far as the demo goes. First, I'd like to show you how we navigate by PSC code. Again, that's Product Service Classification Code within GovShop, to see a listing of suppliers and to filter. So let me do that first, and I'll come back to this slide to pick up on numbers 2 and 3. So right off the top, let me go to GovShop, the main page. Okay, so this is govshop.com. This is the main page. You can actually begin your search in multiple ways. You can search by keyword, which is this big white box in the middle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the lower left, which is one of the other ways to search, and that's by product or service code. There's multiple code sets that we're going to have completely loaded up into GovShop. One is the Psc Codes, which is product and service classification. The second is NAICS, North American Industry Classification System. NIGP codes is used extensively in state and local. We have lots of folks on today's webinar from federal, state, and local. The NIGP codes, while the codes are loaded up, the suppliers are in progress of being mapped over, so not completely mapped over yet. So for today, I'm going to use the Psc codes to demonstrate part 1 of today's demo. Part 1, I'm going to go to that part of the Psc code system which has the professional services groupings. So here we are, the R area, R4, R6, R7. The first thing I want to demonstrate is if I hover above these Psc codes, any one of them, you can see a tally of the number of unique suppliers within that code group, be it at the first level in the tree. This one right here, the R level, you'll see about 67,000 suppliers there. If I drop down to level 2 within the R group, so if I go to R4, you can see the total there. And of course, I can expand any one of these that has a plus sign to the left. That means I can still expand it and see more detail. So if I expand R4, I'll see the full 4-digit beginning with R of the Psc codes. And if I hover over any one of those, I can see the total number of suppliers. I'm going to pick one of these. I'm going to pick R408, Program Management Support Services. You can see right here, there's about 10,000 suppliers, a little over 10,000 suppliers within R408. And now to actually see those suppliers, I'm going to click on R408. That takes me to a separate page which lists out all 10,000 suppliers. So that's wonderful. There's 10,000 suppliers. If I keep scrolling, I can scroll all the way down to the full 10,000. But honestly, I need to be able to do something else to make this practical and pragmatic for my purposes. So what I'm going to do is, on this page, you can see this page is specifically for R408. And you'll notice right over here, near the top of the page, there's this button that says Browse and Filter Suppliers. So beginning with this set of 10,000 suppliers for R408 Psc code, I can click on Browse and Filter. And it takes me to another page, which again lists out the full 10,000 suppliers as a starting point, as you can see here. In addition, you'll notice on the left-hand side, I have a variety of different filtering categories. So I've already, you'll notice here in the upper left, this is already filtered on R408, but there's many more filtering dimensions that I can use. So for example, let me scroll down. If I wanted to filter by location served, currently it's by state, but very soon you'll be able to filter the location in a much more granular way. I believe it's going to be down to city or zip code and within a certain mile radius, but right now it's by state. So let's say I wanted to filter further based on the state of California. I noticed that we have a few people from California attending today. So if I click on that, I went from 10,000 plus suppliers down to 494. And you'll notice here, toward the top of this page, you can see a summary of all the filters that I have selected. So I've got that one Psc code selected for Program Management Services. I've got a location served filter, that being the state of California. And so that brought me down to 494 suppliers. If I filter further, let's say I want to filter by Service Disabled Veteran Owned Small Business, that's SDVOSB. I click on that filter, And now I'm down to 59 suppliers. So we went from 10,000 suppliers for that PSC code R408, which was for program management services. We went from 10,000 suppliers down to, I think it was 400 and change, down to the state of California filter. And then finally down to 59 suppliers with the government set aside for SDVOSB. This is not meant to be a training session, of course. So what I'm doing is I'm basically demonstrating for you how you can rapidly select a set of suppliers by product or service offering, and then relatively quickly, based on just a couple of filters, get this enormous list of suppliers down to something that you might be able to work off of. So that was the first part of the demo that I wanted to show you. The second part of the demo, I'm going to refer back to my cheat sheet here on this slide. Number 2, navigate by browse and filter. So I'm going to go back to the GovShop main page. Before I do, I'm going to reset all filters here. Great. So all filters have been reset. I'm going to go back to the GovShop main page. And instead of beginning my search in the lower left, which is what I did previously for demo part 1, for demo part 2, once I close out this chat box, for demo part 2, I'm going to initiate my search here in the lower right. Let me zoom into this so you can see it better. It says browse and filter all suppliers. It's going to be similar to what we just saw a moment ago, but the starting point is the browse and filter page with all 760,000 plus suppliers in GovShop as my starting point. From here, I can actually initiate a search by first filtering on the product or service codes that I want to zoom in on. And by the way, I could have done this with MAX codes. I will also be able to do this with NIGP codes once the suppliers have been fully categorized by NIGP code. But let me begin by some of the professional services areas herein. So within R, within the PSC code grouping, that's where you've got all of the professional services suppliers. So I'm going to select R4, R6, R7. So the key point here is you can actually begin your search on the search and filter page and select whichever subset of PSC codes you want to use. Now in this case, I'm selecting all of R4, all of R6, all of R7. If I wanted to, I could be very specific and expand any one of these R4 and select any subset therein or any individual code that I want. And so that's part of the power of beginning your search by filtering on the code set. But in this example, I've selected R4, R6, R7, and I'm also going to come up here and to show you that I can select literally any set of codes that I want. I'm going to select D3. D3 is IT services. It reads as ADP and telecommunications here, but it's IT services. I just happen to know that because I'm generally familiar with all of these code sets. And so I've selected all of these 4 areas within the PSC codes. I'm now going to select, or rather press the button Apply Filter in the upper right. I'll zoom back out so you can see the result. Okay, so that's returned back to me 82,000 plus suppliers across these 4 broad areas within the PSC codes, D3, R4, R6, and R7. So you can begin your search over here as well on the browse and filter page. And once again, this is just an enormous number of suppliers. This is more so the number that I presented in one of the earlier slides as we began this webinar. But once again, I can select by any one of these filter areas. So say I wanted to filter by women-owned small business. Let's see what that did. I went from 82,000 down to 16,000. Say I want to select filter further by revenue size. So I'm going to come down here, and within these revenue tiers, let's say I want to filter for companies that are 5 million or less in revenue. So I can select the appropriate filter boxes here, and I'm down to 5,000 suppliers that are within these 4 PSC areas that have a government set aside of woman-owned small business less than 5 million in revenue. And I think those were the only filters. Okay, let's apply one more filter because 5,000 is still a pretty huge number. Let's say I'm in the state of Colorado. I'm going to select Colorado. And now I'm down to 86 suppliers. So this was the second way to initiate a search, by coming directly to the Browse and Filter page, selecting on your product or service categories, such as what we did over here, and then continuing to select on additional filters. So that was the second thing I wanted to demonstrate. So we went from 80,000 some suppliers down to 86 by selecting an additional 3 filters: Colorado, woman-owned small business, and the appropriate revenue tier that I wanted to select. So pretty quick to go from a fairly large number that you really can't work off of to presumably a more meaningful number of suppliers, more targeted toward the set of companies that you're looking for. There's a third part of the demo that I want to also cover, and then I'll move on to questions that you might have, because we'll have a few minutes at the end for questions. The third part is I'd like to now go into a supplier profile and just highlight the types of information that you'll find there. Recall that the proposition for GovShop is to provide you with a comprehensive supply base, but also provide you with meaningful information on what it is the suppliers do. I'm going to select, let me go back and reselect the professional services category. So we're looking at professional services suppliers that come up, and I'll hit up one of them for profile so we can take a look and see what information is present. I'm reselecting R4, R6, R7. I'm applying the filter, and I'm just going to click on the top supplier here. It's named Time Solutions. Let's have a look at the profile for Time Solutions. So at the very top of the supplier profile, which you see here, there's a brief description of this company, what they do. As we scroll down, we see some basic supplier information, which includes their DUNS code, year founded, and a couple of other basic pieces of information, such as number of employees, their revenue tier. Scroll down a little bit more and you see a couple of highlighted product and service areas for this supplier. If I scroll down a little bit more, I can see some basic contact information. I see the address, I see a phone number, I see a point of contact. If I come down a little bit more, I see a summary of their diversity status and government set-aside programs that they might be a part of. I also see, if I scroll down a little bit more, a listing of leverageable contracts. So for the federal sector, that would be things like the federal supply schedules. They're listed over here. This particular company belongs to 2 different federal supply schedules, one of which is the professional services schedule. If I scroll down a little bit more, I see that there is another federal contract vehicle, the GWAC, Government-Wide Acquisition Contract, that this particular company belongs to. If they were also on a national cooperative contract, you would see that listed here as well. This particular supplier does not have a national cooperative contract that they're listed against. And if I continue to scroll down, I can see the various product service classifications that this supplier's offerings are tagged against. Before I leave, I do want to show you one more thing. I'm going to go back to the listing of suppliers where we were a moment ago. And again, this is a listing of suppliers where I filtered on the 3 professional services areas within the Psc codes. If I wanted to take this approximately 67,000 suppliers, and I wanted to list only those that have national cooperative contracts, I'm not sure if you saw that, but I clicked on the filter to the left where it said contract vehicles. I have many choices here, one of which is national cooperative contracts. If I expand it, I can select on individual cooperatives, but rather than do that, I'm just going to select national cooperative contracts as a whole to see which of those 67,000 suppliers belong to any national cooperative contract. I'm going to click Apply Filter. Okay, 316 suppliers out of those 66,000 plus actually belong to one or more national cooperative contract. So that's another way you could search. And of course, if you wanted to filter further, Based on location served, you can obviously do that. But to make sure that we have a few minutes left for questions, I may just pause here. It's my intention actually to do a follow-up webinar, multiple follow-up webinars that take a deeper dive, say for example, in searching within the contracts for professional services suppliers and other related topics. So I'll be sure to do some deeper dives going forward. But this was meant to be a quick, brief orientation around how you can fairly quickly and intuitively search for professional services suppliers and contracts on GovShop. So given that we have probably only a couple of minutes remaining, let me move over here to questions and open it up. Frank, do we have any questions that have come in?
Hey, Ash, we haven't had any questions. I think it's a nice, comprehensive presentation.
Okay, great. I realize it might have seemed like I breezed through it. My intention was not to impart training, but rather to show you how easy it is to identify the professional services suppliers, the different methods of searching that you can begin with. You can begin with the product service code trees. You can begin with a browse and filter page, and you can rapidly go from an enormous number of suppliers and for professional services down to something more relevant and more meaningful based on the filters that you apply. So we're going to continue this series of professional services webinars in searching suppliers and contracts over the coming weeks and months. So please do stay tuned for continuing webinars in the series. We're just about out of time, so I would like to thank everyone for attending. And before I leave, Frank, just double checking, any questions come in?
We do have a question. Does GovShop.com have an acronym guide for the code sets? That's a good question, actually. We don't have an acronym guide, but we do work in government procurement, and that's a very acronym-rich environment. So we should take that on potentially as a blog post or a guide. Just talk about all the different acronyms we have as we work in government contracting. So thanks, Victoria, for that question and suggestion.
Absolutely. In fact, you can absolutely. Thank you, Victoria. And if you can see my screen, I think that's a very good suggestion to add in. So if you can see my screen, I'm hovering over for buyers, and you can see some expansion areas come up. You can see some training videos, frequently asked questions, research library events. Might not be a bad idea for us to develop a listing of acronyms. So Victoria, thank you for that subtle nudge. I think it's a very good idea, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. We are thinking along those lines, and meaning having reference material available for buyers and for suppliers for that matter. And so as we continue our rollout, we're going to take that into consideration and add something that describes various acronyms that are commonly used within government procurement. So Frank, if there's no other questions, I'll turn it back over to you to conclude this webinar.
Great. Thanks very much, Ash, for sharing all this information with us. Like you mentioned, we will have follow-up in this series. We also have other great webinars that are scheduled. You can see those on publicspendforum.com on our events page, and also on GovShop in the tab right there under buyers, the bottom there, events. So check it out. We'd love to see you on the next webinar, which I believe is towards the end of the month, on public procurement metrics and measurement. So thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time. GovShop is free to use, so we encourage you to start using it today and conduct your best market research ever. Thanks a lot, and have a good remainder of your week.